even get to cross.
What's going on, everybody? Jolt here from TheTokenMinorities, and I am back with my Week 8 team builder of the GBA D-League. This week we are against my good friend Aberforth and the Newcastle Umbreon. Played him many times in the past in the NPL, and now we have our clash here in the GBA D-League. But make sure to go check him out. He'll be linked in the description below. Very cool guy, super solid hyper offense player in the format, and even in Smoke on Tiers as well, as I know he has a lot of experience in Smoke on Tiers, particularly Ubers, and he displays all of those interests on his channel, so make sure to go give him a look. Now, Abe has had a very interesting season, as his caliber of battling is incredibly strong. He is, in my opinion, one of, if not the strongest pure battler in the league, but he has not really shown that this season. There's been a lot of errors, I feel, in his prep and just in general in his battles. He hasn't always made the optimal plays, and that happens sometimes. I understand that. It's happened to me too this season, but yeah, it's not been the strongest season for him, but that doesn't really mean that, or doesn't at all mean that I can take him lightly in this matchup, because I firsthand know how tough of a player Abe is and how tough his style of building is to prep for. But the fact remains that his style of prep is relatively constant each battle that he has, and that he loves to run a lot of setup moves on his offensive Pokemon. His offensive win condition is almost always setup oriented. He usually will have at least 2 setup options, even whenever they feel a little bit forced onto a team. In this case, as you can see, his team in front of you being the Jirachi Mamoswine, the Crobat Mega Beedrill, Primarina, Miltank, Rotom, Ghost, Persian, Alola, Como-O, Embor, and Serperior. Not everything on that team has readily available setup options. For example, the Miltank can run Curse. It's not typically seen, but it's something that Abe would be likely to do because he is Abe. He loves to run setup moves on things like that Miltank. You could also see Dragon Dance Como-O, Autotomize Como-O, Calm Mind Jirachi is a very likely one. Even Nasty Plot Crobat's a possibility, SD Beedrill. There's a lot of things he can do, and I expect to see at least 2 of those options come where he has a Pokemon that could do very well without a setup move, but it's going to run one anyways because Abe loves to have ways to break through teams like that. That's just Abe's style. So that's something that I'm really expecting here going into this match. But if you look across his team and you look across just the trends in Abe's building throughout his career in draft format, he almost always builds offensive teams. His draft on itself is very, very offensive. He only has a few things that can take hits, but those are still more offensive by nature. Primarina is typically used offensively as a special breaker. Como-O is a little bit bulkier, but Abe was very rarely going to bring bulkier Como-O sets. If it is bulky, it probably still has a setup move like Bulk Up or Dragon Dance. Alright, does it get Cursed? Not sure if it gets Cursed. It definitely gets Bulk Up, though, which would just be better. So Abe is not going to bring much bulk, I don't think, in our matchup. He might bring some bulkier Pokemon, but it's not going to be a wall core, per se. And that means that because he doesn't have those switch-ins, he has to have a team that is faster, and that's typically how he builds as well. He likes to have speed, he likes to have momentum, and those are because those are really consistent strategies that he likes to use, they can be exploited through my team building. So some of the ways that I want to do that here in this match are basically bringing just classic hyper offense breakers. So a hyper offense breaker is typically something like a Choice Scarf user that has coverage for a lot of his team, something that runs Rock Polish or Agility to boost speed. Winning the speed control battle is huge against a very offensive and relatively frail team like Abe's is. And just in general, speed control is just a very key thing. Not just having like Rock Polish and Agility, but just ways to control speed or just command speed throughout the game in any fashion is essential in this type of matchup. But because this team is also very momentum-based, I can pressure that momentum with entry hazards. And as you'll see here, as I jump into my building, that's exactly what I build around. I build around speed control and entry hazards, and that combination will be able to hopefully shut down his momentum and shut down his offense, just break him down enough so that my faster things will be able to sweep late game. So that's generally what I'm trying to do here. While doing all that, though, I have to be very careful around his kind of fat breakers, as he has the Embor, Como-O, and the in the Primarina that are all very, very fat and also can hit me very, very hard. Things I quite frankly don't switch into very well at all. The only way I can really deal with them is to break them down one by one with members of my team. Those are Pokemon that are hard to OHKO, quite frankly. Emboar is a little bit easier than Como and Primarina especially are to knock out in one hit, but even so, those are the hardest things on his team that hit hard and are hard to take out. The Jirachi is hard to take out in one hit, obviously, but at least it doesn't hit that hard unless it gets a boost from a Calm Mind, which Abe will probably run Calm Mind, and knowing Abe, he wants to have a setup move on pretty much everything, it feels like sometimes. But yeah, just some initial thoughts here, looking at the matchup. So that's the kind of approach I want to take in terms of combating his team. But some of the biggest threats I feel he could bring on his team that I have to make sure I prepare for accordingly. The Calm Mind Jirachi, like I already said, I feel like that's a very likely bring. If he brings the Jirachi, it could either be a Stealth Rocker, as I feel Jirachi is the strongest possible Stealth Rocker on his team against my draft. And, excuse me, the other option would be Calm Mind, as Calm Mind Jirachi with just Psychic and some coverage moves is able to deal a lot of damage to my entire team, especially if he's able to pack Wish or some sort of recovery, maybe a Berry onto that to give me a hard time. So that's certainly something that could be a threat. I think that the Primarina, if Choice Specs is a big threat, if it's able to get a free switch in, obviously my goal will be to not let that happen, but if it does happen, then it's essentially a kill and there's not much I can do about it, so I really have to be careful about that. Maybe build a team that ensures that it's not able to get those guaranteed free switch-ins, or at least play so that it's not able to get those switch-ins until late in the game when it's okay to be sacking Mons, because my Mons have already fulfilled their role. So that's just something to note. So Primarina and Jirachi, both very, very big offensive threats. The Emboar is also a massive threat if it's Choice Scarfed or even Life Orb or Banded. I don't switch into Emboar, period, so that's just really, really hard for me to deal with. And Como as well could be a threat, because I know for a fact if Abe brings Como, it's going to be a setup variant in some sort. He might be Specs. He's brought Specs in the past. I would say that if he brings Como, it is more likely to be Dragon Dance, just because of how weak my team really is to Dragon Dancing dragons that have dragon coverage and ground coverage. That combination is kind of tough for my draft to deal with. So that's what I would expect to see if he brings the Como, but of course I have to also respect the potential for Specs. Regardless, I usually can't afford to switch out versus Como anyways, unless it's something that's not able to 2-hit KO it naturally. So we'll just see how that goes in the battle, but yeah, those are just some of my initial thoughts here at team previews. So let's go ahead and hop on over, or draft preview rather, let's go ahead and hop on over to the team that I'm deciding to bring here. And like I said, I'm going to build this team around the concept of speed control and hazard stack. So starting this off with the speed control, number one, the Choice Scarfer that actually hits this team really freaking hard, and that is the Mew with a modest nature. This is just going to be outspeeding the it outspeeds Como, I believe, at +1. If I recall correctly, that's what this EV investment is doing, just outspeeding a Jolly Como at +1 after a Dragon Dance, and OHKOing it with a Psychic, especially after entry hazard damage if he happens to have a little bit of bulk. Como is surprisingly fat, actually. It has very high defensive stats, so it did require entry hazards to be able to knock him out guaranteed with a Psychic or Psyshock even from the Mew. So this is just very good against this team. Late game, it certainly has potential to sweep because it can outspeed the Crobat, can outspeed the Mega Beedrill, can outspeed the Como, the Emboar, and be super effective against all of those, as well as do a lot of damage to the Mamo, does a fair amount of damage to the Primarina, and I also have Volt Switch on this, as you can see, to help me wear down that Primarina, force it to switch into hazards potentially, and Volt Switch on that, and that damage will add up to where after another round of hazards, it's very likely actually going to be in range of a Psychic the next time around, so that certainly works out well in my favor. Volt Switch is also nice to potentially gain momentum on the Crobat. If I've already revealed to be Scarfed, then it should be pretty easy to get that Volt Switch off against the Crobat. Otherwise, Psychic is usually going to be my play, though, because it's essentially no drawback unless the Jirachi has proved itself to be a massive threat against my team, in which case I might have to catch that with a Fire Blast, or potentially a more middle ground play of an Aura Sphere, depending on what he has left in the game at that point in time. So this combination of coverage should be able to pretty safely spam some type of move late game. That's the goal. This is probably, I don't know if I want to call this the top win con, but it's one of the two top win cons in this game because of its ability to spam coverage moves against this team and outspeed literally everything that's not Choice Scarf or at +1 of his own. So yeah, that's certainly good. I think he will bring a Choice Scarf or potentially. I'm not 100% convinced that he will, just because Crobat and Mega Beedrill both have a lot of natural speed that actually outpace my entire team as is, so he might not actually bring a Scarfer, and if he doesn't, that means this Mew outspeeds everything, which is fantastic. So yeah, so just a really solid mon. Aura Sphere specifically is for the Miltank, just in case he brings it. I thought about running several other potential moves in this slot, but just in case he brings the Miltank, I think it's important to have a super effective option that can most likely 2-hit KO it, especially after Hazard's damage, and if I'm able to knock off its leftovers if it happens to have that. So that's the Mew, very solid against him here in this matchup for sure. Next up is the Cobalion. This is my other win condition in this game, so this is relatively standard EV spread. It's just outpacing a max speed Jirachi, as if he brings Jirachi offensive, it's probably going to be max speed to speed tie my Mew. This is Double Dance with a Shuka Berry, allowing me to set up on Mamoswine as well as set up on the Mega Beedrill, and because of Cobalion's natural bulk, I actually could set up on several other members of his team, including the Miltank, including potentially the Rotom, although that's a little bit risky. I could set up on the Serperior, I could set up on the Crobat as well. I'm not sure if I said that. I sets up on a lot of things on his team. So this is a very solid mon. Depending on what he brings, it might have several opportunities to set up. It might only have one, but the fact remains that this is an absolute menace with the combination of Close Combat and Zen Headbutt. I don't have to get both the Rock Polish and the Swords Dance. One or the other might be just fine depending on what he brings, but if I'm able to get both, and if my hazards are on the field, and if Jirachi's a little bit weakened and Primarina's a little bit weakened, this just wins. Okay, so very, very good against him in this matchup. It complements the Mew very well because Cobalion breaks down the things that stand in the way of Mew, the Jirachi, the Primarina. Those are the things that could stand in the way of my Mew sweeping, and Cobalion also takes advantage of the things that could switch into my Mew at some point during the game. Specifically things like the Alolan Persian and potentially a weekend Jirachi, where this can come in and scare it out, as even a Choice Scarf Jirachi obviously wouldn't be able to do a whole lot to me, as I do have a naturally high defense stats, and if it's Special Scarf Jirachi, then I think that's a lot more manageable because it's not going to be able to flinch me as easily. So yeah, just a really solid offensive combination in this matchup against a very offensively oriented team like Abel always bring in draft format, it seems. So to support those offensive win cons on my side, those hyper offense breakers, now we have some hazard stacks. So next up is the Scolipede with the spikes, a jolly nature, allowing me to again outspeed the Jirachi. And then I have the Poison Jab, Rock Slide, and Mega Horn with the Rock EMZ. This essentially allows me to nuke Crobat after Stealth Rock damage, as Crobat probably will come in on Stealth Rocks, as my Stealth Rocker isn't really something that screams Crobat please come in, just because it has to risk getting burned. It's going to be Seismitoad, I'll show you that in a second, but yeah, so I feel like Crobat's going to come in on Stealth Rock. If the Crobat happens to be a Charty Berry, that's fine, because a Rock EMZ, Continental Crush, plus another Rock Slide should be able to knock out the Crobat. And yeah, so this just means that that's really his only true defogger. He has Mega Beedrill, that's not really a defogger. He could do it, but knowing AP won't. In fact, I actually don't really expect him to bring defog at all. He might, but it's just not really in Abe's style, I don't feel, to bring defog, because for a player like him who wants to always have momentum and wants to always be applying offensive pressure, he doesn't really want to waste a turn going for defog. So I feel that either he will defog away my hazards and the hazards that he happens to get on my side of the field. And by the way, he's very suicidal with his leads that happen to be Stealth Rockers. He is pretty suicidal with his Stealth Rocker leads. If he wants to defog away my hazards and get rid of his hazards, that's just great for me, quite honestly, because I have the Torn coming up here soon, as well as the Scolipede that doesn't exactly appreciate the Stealth Rock. So the hazard stack option is nice for that, as well as being able to punish him for his Volt turning that I know he wants to do throughout this game. So yeah, so this is really solid against him. The combination Mega Horn and Poison Jab, just the dual stab, strongest possible coverage, the strongest possible moves I could have on Scolipede besides the one to hit the Crobat. I just felt like that was the best overall, because I believe it covers everything at least neutrally outside of the Rotom Ghost and the Crobat. Of course, both of those can be hit by the Rock Slide or the Continental Crush, depending on what he decides to bring in the matchup. So, and I'm not sure, no, Beedrill, does Beedrill actually resist Poison Jab? I think it might. I don't think Bug is weak to poison, so Rock Slide would also be good for the Beedrill, although it's not like Beedrill's really taking hits anyways, because I'm not playing the Verd, I'm playing Aberforth, so it's a little bit different this time around, I think, when I'm facing a Mega Beedrill. Shouldn't be encountering a Spadef or Fizdef one, hopefully. But yeah, so that is the Scolipede, pretty solid. I have the extra investment here in defense and a little bit in HP, basically to help me take, so the Spadef investment is to allow me to take a Specs Moonblast from Primarina after Rocks, and then the rest in Fizdef to best take hits from Mega Beedrill, as well as take hits from Mamoswine, like an Ice Shard, for example. So that is the Scolipede, and then I have my Seismitoad. I already talked about this a little bit. This is just my Stealth Rocker in this matchup. It's also my guaranteed response to a Choice Scarfed Emboar. I don't expect this to necessarily 1v1 Emboar, but I want to whittle it down, especially if it is Choice Scarf, because it's going to be taking damage from its recoil from Flare Blitz anyways. Ideally, it'll also take damage from hazards, the spikes, the Stealth Rock, and my Rocky Helmet as well. So that combination would help me deal with a Choice Scarfed Emboar if that's what he decides to bring. That's probably the scariest set against my team, I feel, just because of its speed. Otherwise, my team is able to naturally outspeed any sort of other Emboar, and quite honestly, I don't know. I really don't expect Scarf Emboar if he brings it. It depends on his team composition entirely. If he brings something like Como-O, Emboar, and Primarina, then I'm going to expect Emboar to be Choice Scarf because he has those two other slow breakers that he can turn to. But if, just depending on his composition, I'll hopefully be able to gauge if he is a Choice Scarfed Emboar. I really don't expect it. Just from thinking through the ideal mons for him to bring, I really don't expect to see Choice Scarfed Emboar unless he's just quick building, which Abe does do that sometimes, so it's kind of hard to really gauge that. But just thinking about the fact that I really have a solid response to Scarfed Emboar and a Fizdef Seismitoad, as well as even my Rotom Heat if I were to bring that more defensively. I don't really think Scarf will come, but that's one of those things that's up in the air. I'm not really confident in that assumption. A lot of it will just come down to how he plays his team, what I think his team needs from Emboar based upon the information I have, and then I'll make judgments from there. I really don't want to hard switch this into Emboar, if I'm being honest. I really don't want to until I know what his set is, because Emboar has access to Grass Knot. I don't want to lose this, especially if I don't have Rocks up yet. So basically I might have to play a little bit recklessly with my offensive mons against Emboar until it's confirmed what set it is, because I really expect the Emboar to actually be a lure for this with Grass Knot, maybe bluffing a Choice Scarf. So that's my thought process. We'll see how that goes. I intend to carry that out through the game, most likely expecting the Emboar to not be Choice Scarfed, but it just depends on his team composition. So we'll leave it at that and go from there. But Spadef investment allows this to help deal with the Rotom Ghost, excuse me, which I think could definitely come as Ghost. Levitating Ghost does very well against my team defensively, while Rotom isn't the best Pokemon overall. I mean, it's a tier 5 for a reason. It's not that strong, but it can definitely be annoying if I don't prep for it adequately, and I think a lot of people in the league really haven't prepped for it adequately, as Abe has been able to use it to great effect, but I'm definitely not going to sleep on Rotom just in case he happens to bring it, as I could see him bringing that as potentially a King response, potentially a Scolipede response that switches in well to both of those if I don't bring proper ways to deal with it. So the Spadef investment allows me to deal with Hex from Rotom after it burns me, basically, and then the defense investment, of course, for the Emboar specifically, as well as other just random physical hits, like maybe a Scarf Jirachi that doesn't really appreciate a Rocky Helmet. So next up is the, checking my time, alright, cool. Next up is the Mega Kangaskhan. So this is just an adamant nuke with dual priority Fake Out Sucker Punch, very good against a setup-oriented player like Abe. Having both of those options in the back could definitely come in clutch. It's also nice against a potential Scarf Jirachi, as Sucker Punch, of course, could out-prioritize his Iron Heads, as that's not a win con I want to allow him to have. Knowing Abe's luck and knowing my own, that's just not something I want to leave up to chance, so Sucker Punch can definitely bail me out of that sort of situation. It also can at least wear down the Jirachi so that my Mew is able to more easily break it down over time, as I could definitely see a team build where the Jirachi is the only true switch into that Mew set, and if I'm able to weaken down that Jirachi early, then that would really help out the Mew late game, especially in combination with the entry hazards that I hope to have on the field throughout the majority of this game. So that's the idea with that. Now, I'm actually not running normal stab outside of Fake Out. I'm not running return in this matchup, and that's because I do not want to fall into the trap of Rocky Helmets this week because of how important Kang is in this matchup in terms of revenge killing potential setup threats. For example, I could see him bringing a Rocky Helmet, a Lowland Persian, and I was considering something like Focus Punch actually on this Mega Kangaskhan in the first draft of the team to help deal with that, but I don't think it's likely enough of a bring for me to justify bringing Focus Punch on the Mega Kang, so instead I'm opting for Earthquake and Crunch. So basically what this does is if he brings a fat Jirachi with Rocky Helmet, this lets me beat that. First of all, as I could certainly see the Jirachi being Rocky Helmet to deal with Mega Kangaskhan. Alternatively, I could see something like a Rocky Helmet Miltank, which Earthquake would still do a decent amount against, at least forcing him to Milk Drink, allowing me to get an offensive switch into something like my Cobalion, my Mew, my Torn, just something to help me break down that Miltank. So that's a way to deal with Rocky Helmet Miltank. If he happens to be Rocky Helmet Persian, Persian doesn't have recovery, and I'll be able to wear him down very quickly with a combination of Entry Hazards and Earthquake, as well as having a pretty nice switch into either my Torn or into my Cobalion versus that Alolan Persian, and essentially not lose too much momentum out of the deal just based upon the attack options that I have on those Pokemon. So yeah, so this type of set helps deal with whatever his Rocky Helmet response is going to be to Kang, and if it happens to even be the Rotom Ghost, then obviously I have Crunch for that, and because I am an adamant Mega Kangaskhan, that's going to hurt a lot, okay? So Rotom's not really going to be a response to this Kangaskhan. It might be able to live a hit, but basically all I have to do is to whittle it down into range, into guaranteed range of a Crunch, and then the Rotom is no longer a response, quite frankly. And I don't even have to reveal Crunch necessarily until I am faced with a scenario versus a Rotom, because nothing else on his team actually forces me to go for Crunch unless it's like a Superior, and in that case, then I might just go for it. I also have a Torn that I can switch and do pretty freely against it, so we'll just see how that goes, but most likely I'll be able to actually conceal Crunch until I'm in the situation versus the Rotom if he brings it. Obviously, if he doesn't bring Rotom, then I don't need to conceal anything, but you understand. So yeah, Mega Kangaskhan, massive breaker against the team and a good bailout against his setup threats. Now finally, we have the Torn T. This set took me so freaking long to figure something out that I liked. Torn T is kind of hard to use in this matchup, I feel, because it seems like a Pokemon that more so will go 1-for-1 against him, in that he could easily bring Banded Crobat or Beedrill and be able to offensively check me as soon as I'm able to knock out something on his team with this. And I'm not really okay with that, because Torn T is such a good mon offensively against him, and I don't want to be forced out versus Mega Beedrill and Crobat, allowing them to basically get a free kill against the rest of my team. So I needed to be a very bulky Torn, and that requires me to run max HP essentially here with the 185 or the 244 EVs and HP, and also leftovers, just to allow me to stay at as high of health as possible, actually outside of range of a hit from Mega Beedrill. After, I believe, after a round of leftovers, guaranteed from a Jolly Mega Beedrill, I'm outside of range even after Stealth Rocks, which is nice. I think Adamant might be a roll. I'll have to take a look at that, but yeah, the leftovers are actually really important in terms of avoiding those KOs from those revenge killers like that. So a really fat set like this also allows me to take hits from Kommo-o, takes hits from Primarina, even not really specs, but I have knockoff on this and I can get rid of those really dangerous specs, which will help out my entire team really in terms of dealing with this thing defensively and even offensively, as well as I can even scout out what its set is by going for a knockoff. Maybe it's not even Choice Lock, maybe he's trying to lure me. That'll allow me to check that out as well. So combination Hurricane and Heat Wave, really Hurricane hits everything on his team, with the only exceptions being the Rotom and the Jirachi, both of which are hit pretty hard by Heat Wave. Knockoff, of course, can hit the Rotom as well, and it's very possible that I'll be able to get a knockoff on the Rotom with this, and because of my HP and Spadef investment, I can take hits from Rotom if needed, even a T-Bolt from a Rotom, as if he brings it, it's almost certainly going to be defensive. If he brings Choice Scarf, then good on him. I have a Seismitoad and don't really care. So yeah, I think he's more likely to bring defensive Will-O-Wisp Hex if he brings the Rotom, and this would be able to deal with that set as well. In fact, it's very possible this would be my first switch into Rotom if I'm expecting a Willow or a Toxic potentially. I'm not really sure. I can go either into this or into Seismitoad, depending on how valuable one or the other is given the certain matchup, but this is very, very valuable in terms of dealing with the Superior, especially as I don't really have great Superior switch-ins on my team. But with this being leftovers and a little bit SPDEF and a lot of HP investment, it should be able to deal with Superior. Probably the scariest Superior set might actually be Choice Scarfed, as nothing on my team will be able to outspeed Superior that is Choice Scarfed, except a priority from my Mega Kangaskhan or the Rock Polish up from my Cobalion. That's the only ways I can outspeed that, but the good news is I might be able to knock off that Choice Scarf as well with my Torn Teep, potentially, which would allow me to then outspeed it on the following turn. So I've got some ways to work around it, and that's the important thing, I think. So I think we're about ready to wrap this up here. I want to say, though, that the battle might be uploaded late. I don't really know. I haven't played Abe yet at this point, and we're having a lot of trouble scheduling this thing. I don't even know what time this team builder is going to be going up, because obviously I can't upload this before the battle actually happens. So I'm sorry if this is late. I don't even know if it's going to be late at this point. And I'm really sorry if the battle itself is up late, as it's kind of out of my control. I'm going to be gone this weekend. I wanted to get the battle done during the week, but Abe's in the UK, I think, right now, so it's just a mess trying to schedule with him. And yeah, hopefully we can get this battle up for you guys. But if not, I do apologize, and I'll get it up as soon as I can. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all whenever the battle goes up. Hopefully tomorrow from whenever this is uploaded. It should be tomorrow from whenever this is uploaded. But anyways, I will see you all next time. Peace.